Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the City Council for October 19th, 2009 to order. First thing on the agenda, as always, is the roll call and the determination of quorum. Amber, if you would, please.
Waugh? Here. Martinson? Here. Quaker? Here. Costello?
Here.
LaCroix?
Here.
Chapman?
Here.
Olson? Here. Weifenbach?
Here.
Kroger?
Here.
Hadcock? Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Just a reminder for everyone in the audience, if you have a cell phone or a pager, we'd appreciate if you turn it in, turn it to the off or the vibrate mode. We'd appreciate that. And also, if you wish to speak to any issue on tonight's agenda, we do have speaker request forms. They're to your left or right over on the media table. If you'd please fill that out, including your name and the item, so as we work our way down the agenda, we'll make sure that we catch it and we don't overlook your thoughts. With that, next thing, as always, is the invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please rise for the invocation. Bill Allkamp from American Missionary Fellowship will be giving our invocation, which will immediately follow up with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, as we come before you this evening and the men and women of this council deliberate over the issues of business before them for this evening, we ask that you would give them clarity and understanding of the issues, that they might render wise and just decisions. We ask that those who would stand before this podium to bring information before them would be able to present that clearly and honestly, and so that the best decisions might be rendered. And Father, that the citizens of Rapid City would be best represented. We commit this time into your hands and ask for your wisdom and guidance for each member of the council and those present here this evening. And we pray this in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Next thing on the agenda, as always, is the adoption of the agenda. Is there anyone from the council who would like to add any additional items to the agenda? Please turn on your light. Let's go to our City Finance Officer, Mr. Jim Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move item 4, which is a bid, to after item number 62.
Yep, I had that on here. We'll
Thank
go ahead
you.
and do that. So we'll be moving item number 4, which is actually on the consent calendar, to follow item number 62, which is a non-consent item. So we'll be moving item number 4 to immediately follow item number 62. Any additional items to be placed on the agenda? Please turn on your light. If not, the chair will look for a motion to approve the agenda as amended, and the only amendment is to move item number 4 to follow item number 62.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion passes. Next up is the approval of the minutes for the October 5th, 2009 City Council meeting. Chair, look for a motion to do so,
So
please.
moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the City Council meeting minutes from October 5th, 2009. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next thing, as always, is our recognition. And I'll ask Paul Miller to come join me up here at the podium. Always have to do this, they always get it short. As always, it's truly a pleasure to recognize those veterans that have served this country so well and have fought for our freedom, and tonight's no exception. Let me just tell you a little bit about our recipient tonight. In fact, let me just start reading this. In partnership with the Veterans Coordination Commission, we're pleased to present the October 2009 Veteran of the Month recognition to Paul V. Miller. Now, Paul began his military career attending radio school in San Diego, and then he was sent to Vietnam in 1968. He served with Headquarters Battery, the 4th Battalion, the 11th Marines for 6 months, and was then transferred to Kilo Battery, where he served for an additional 6 months. He spent time in such areas as Da Nang Hill 34, Liberty Bridge, and Red Beach. Upon returning to the United States, Paul was stationed with Guard Company, Marine Barracks, Washington, D.C., and the Marine Honor Guard. Paul received the Navy Marine Corps Combat Action Unit Citation Ribbons, the Good Conduct, the National Defense, the Vietnam Service with 3 stars, and the Republic of Vietnam Service Medals, and the Republic of Vietnam Cross for Gallantry Unit Award. He returned to college following the completion of his military service, where he began and ran the Veterans Outreach Program at USD. He served in numerous elected positions and appointments in the VFW, the Marine Corps League, and the Vietnam Veterans of America. Paul served as commander of the FBW, Post 3442 in Custer, South Dakota for 4 terms, and the Department of South Dakota's commander of the Marine Corps League for 2 terms. He is president-elect of the VAA, Chapter 463, and Paul is also a member of the DAV, Rapid City Chapter, and is a representative to the Veterans Coordination Committee for the Marine Corps League and the VAA. Paul, thank you for your service and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And as always, we always encourage you to come up and say a few words, if you would, please.
Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my Vietnam Veterans of America chapter for nominating me, the Rapid City Veterans Council for accepting that nomination and putting me on the calendar for October, and the Mayor and City Council for presenting me with this award. I would also like to thank Sentinel Federal Credit Union for their gift and for publishing photos of the award recipients in the Patriot newspaper. Vietnam veterans did not get the recognition of earlier veterans upon their return to, as we used to call it, the world. As a returning Marine, I landed at Marine Air Station El Toro, California. No bands, no flags, no handshakes. But we and our fellow veterans organizations still, since that time, have helped to make sure that veterans receive that richly deserved welcome home. Awards such as this go a long way in healing the mental wounds of Vietnam veterans. In recognizing those veterans that have given more of themselves for their fellow vets since their separation from the service, you show the community that veterans help veterans and that patriotism has not been forgotten or misplaced. The honor flights and well-attended welcome home for the World War II veterans, the Memorial Day ceremonies here, and the Veterans Day Parade show a community that cares. Once again, I accept this award on behalf of the many veterans in the Black Hills area that deserve it but have not received it. And also, this Thursday is my birthday, so thanks for the birthday present.
Ready to roll? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Now is the time for the general public comment period. This is the time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at tonight's meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by the unanimous vote of the council members present. I do not have any speaker request forms. Is there anyone from the public that'd like to talk to about any item that is not on the agenda? If not, we will move on. That does take us to the non-public hearing items. These are items 3 through 63. 3 through 63. Chair will look for a motion to open the public comment on items 3 through 49, please. We have a motion and second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. There again, I have no speaker request forms on any items 3 through 49 inclusive. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on any item 3 through 49? Hi, Ann.
Is it on? Okay.
Yep.
I just want to say thank you to all of you and to all the people who have disabilities. All of you have been so great, and I thank you. And now the work begins because now we're fundraising. So if you guys get a letter in the mail, please respond. We love you. Thank you.
Ann, why don't you state, first of all, state your name and the organization, just so we
All
have it.
right. I'm Ann Van Loan, the Executive Director of Western Resources for Disabled Independence.
Okay, very
Thank
good.
you again.
Thank you so much. Okay. Anyone else who would like to speak to any items 3 through 49 inclusive? And if you would, there again, just state your name for the record and which item that you're talking about.
Bruce Backens
Thank you,
for
Bruce.
the ADA tribute. And I'd like to thank everybody for all the help and what they've done in letting us do this. Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you. Any others? We're dealing with items 3 through 49 inclusive, please. If not, the chair would look for a motion to close the public comment period. We have a motion and second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. Chair needs asked to if any of the items from the consent calendar, items 3 through 49 inclusive, need to be pulled from the consent calendar. Please keep in mind that we did move item number 4 to follow item number 62. So it'll be items 3 through 49 inclusive, with the exception of item 4, which we have moved. Any that we need to have pulled? If so, please turn on your light. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
26, please.
Okay, item 26, got it. Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Number 12.
Okay, item number 12. Any others? Please turn on your light. Any others? If not, the chair will look for a motion to approve the consent calendar 3 through 49 inclusive, with the exception of item 4, which has been moved to item numbers after number 62, and also pulling items 12 and 26.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We're on to item number 12, and Mr. Costello, could you please read that in?
Certainly.
Mike, please.
Thanks for the reminder. Item number 12, authorize staff to advertise bids for Catron Boulevard Highway 16B sanitary sewer extension. Estimated cost of project $950,000. And I yield to the floor.
Okay, could we have a motion, please?
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Oh, there we go. Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question for Robert. Where is the funding source for the 950, if we could, please?
Okay.
950,000.
Mr. Ellis, Robert Ellis is our Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the funding, the $950,000, comes from the wastewater expansion fund. That's Department 834, line item 4380, essentially the wastewater enterprise.
And can I ask about?
Please go ahead.
Did we have that in the funding source for this year, Robert?
Yes, we've had this actually programmed for a number of years in the capital improvement plan, yes.
Thank you, Robert. And at this point, we have no other funding source, the TIPS or anything else that never happened, and
That is correct.
I appreciate you moving this forward, Robert. It's something important to that area for sanitary sewer, so thank you for moving this forward, Robert, and your staff.
Thank you. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is for approval of item 12, which is authorize the staff to advertise for bids for the Catron Boulevard Highway 16B sanitary sewer extension. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. That does take us to item number 26, and Alderwoman Olson, could you please read that in?
Request staff to review the existing ordinances relating to licensing of dogs and cats and to work with the Humane Society on making amendments to those ordinances. And my motion would be to put in place this request.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the request, basically approve a request of staff to review the existing ordinances relating to licensings of cats and dogs and work with Humane Society. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. If we could just have a brief update on what the scope of this would be. Is it new licensing fees? Is it new licensing in general? If we could just have a brief update.
Very good. Let's go to Alderwoman Patty Martinson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. At the last Humane Society board meeting, there was some discussion about changing the licensing fees. However, that is set by ordinance. So in order to change that, we would need to amend the ordinance. So I requested staff to start discussion with Humane Society as far as changing the licensing fees. That was my first specific intent.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Alderman Quaker, anything else you'd still have the floor, sir?
Is there a time frame on this, Mayor?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is for approval. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. That does take us to the end of the consent calendar. And that was through item number 49. We are on to the non-consent calendar. This is items 50 through 63. Just want to make sure, typically, I'm looking at the numbering here. Typically, we would have picked up 44 through 49, but we held public comments for that, so we're in good shape. Marcia, is that correct? Typically, we pick that up separately, but there was no change as far as your recommendations, 46 through 49? Okay, we're in good shape then. Very good, thank you. Non-consent calendar items 50 through 63. Chair would look for motion to open the public comment period on items 50 through 63 inclusive, please. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. I do not have any speaker request forms on any items 50 through 63. 50 through 63. Is anyone in the audience wish to speak to any items 50 through 63 inclusive? If not, Chair would look for a motion to close the public comment period.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item number 50. Let's see, Alderwoman Olson, would you read those in, please? Item number 50, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 50, first reading of ordinance 5551, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by James Hogue for Hogue Land Company in property generally described as located at 818, 910, and 920 East St. Andrew Street, and my motion is for approval.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of first reading of ordinance 5551. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item 51, please.
First reading of ordinance 5552, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by the City of Rapid City for a rezoning from no-use district to low-density residential district on property located west of Valley Drive and north of South Dakota Highway 44, and my motion is for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval for first reading of ordinance 5552. Any discussion on that motion? Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Do we have a picture of where that is at, by chance? I know we still have a second reading, but
Typically, we don't have the background on first reading.
it's not that trailer park there, is it?
I don't, Marcia?
This is the north piece of Royal Nielsen's property that we've had discussions about.
Okay, I'm in the wrong area. Thank you.
Hopefully I'm on the right item.
Thank you, Marcia. No, you're right. Thank you.
Motion on the floor is for approval. First reading ordinance 5552. Any further discussion on that motion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 52, please.
First reading of ordinance number 5550, an ordinance to delegate authority to suspend watering restrictions to the Director of Public Works by amending Section 13.04.600 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. My motion would be for approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. First reading of ordinance number 5550. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item 53, please.
Second reading ordinance number 5544, an ordinance to update alcoholic beverage licensing requirements to reflect changes in state law by amending sections 5.12.030 and 5.12.060 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. My motion is for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of second reading of ordinance 5544. A discussion on that motion? A discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 54, please.
A request by Dream Design International Incorporated for preliminary plat on land located at 1851 Discovery Circle. My motion is for approval with stipulations.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of stipulations. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 55, please.
Authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign lease agreement between the City of Rapid City and Soccer Rapid City. My motion is for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by, whoops. Joel Landine, I suppose you're going to say the version that's on the dais.
That's correct. I did hand out a version.
Sorry.
I apologize for the ordinance. We just got it worked out this afternoon. If you have any questions about, there's a few minor changes, some of the language. The notable changes are that on page 3, it talks about the water supply for the claims versus not yet determined. The parties agree to exercise good faith in renegotiating the lease at such time as water supply alternatives are identified. The other thing that I noted was there was language added about parking fees in the concessions. In the concessions, there was some language added about parking fees and stuff, just so it wasn't in there before. You're aware that those could be included.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, my motion would reflect this most recent document.
Is that all right with the seconder?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Motion on the floor. And the second was to approve the lease between the City of Rapid City and Soccer Rapid City per the amended version provided by the City Attorney's Office. Everyone clear on the motion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 56, please.
Authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign tax increment district financing developers agreement with Cabela's. My motion is for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. At what point will the actual property be transferred? Does this do that?
Let's go to, do you want to direct that to the City Attorney's Office?
Sure.
Okay, let's go to the City Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Mayor. This does not actually transfer. We would have to do a deed and transfer that. I assume that it will come shortly after the agreement's approved, but first they wanted to get the agreement in place. We also have to get the plat approved, which was, I think, 2 items earlier. And then now that the plat's approved, we can actually transfer title to the properties.
Okay.
Yep, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to reiterate my position that I believe that the property was transferred effective the certification of the public vote. And I would hope that the property taxes are paid in arrears to that date at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
I guess my main issue is all the things that we made changes on for Cabela's. I think we should have some type of summary of all the things that we have done with this tax increment and what we're doing for changes for a summary for the council, because we are approving many things on with this different tax increment number 64. And in summary, I'd like to see all the things that we're doing for Cabela's or not doing for Cabela's or trading with Cabela's. Because for me, it's hard to keep track of everything we've done or what we are doing. I don't really want to stifle this process, but I also would like it when we do these, when we're up here on the dais or before, that we have some of those outlining changes so we have a summary of it. And maybe that sounds kind of crazy in one sense, but I think it's very positive for, to me, I haven't kept track of everything at this point. I don't know if the other council members feel differently than this, but this is a big TIF. This was a TIF that we helped out. And I want to make sure that we're not giving or doing anything we wouldn't do for anybody else, or doing a TIF and helping out Cabela's as we did in a sense, and who actually helped out Rapid City with economic development. But we want to make sure we're protecting the citizens of Rapid City. And with the summary, at this point, I would appreciate one of all these changes. And at this point, I probably, until I see those changes, probably won't agree with some of this at this point until I know exactly what we're doing and what we're giving. So, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Any further discussion? Let me ask the procedural questions. Anyone wish to speak before Alderman Quaker speaks for a second time? If so, please turn on your light. If not, let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Alderwoman Hadcock raised a reasonable question, and I was wondering if we have a summary of the answers to the question that she has raised. And I have two other opportunities to speak, so I can speak on the next item as well, but I would like to have an answer to the question that you raised.
Okay. I'm going to go to Joel Landine here in just a second, but just for everyone's information, the link is there. There are no changes to the TIF, and the only two line items within this TIF are reimbursing the city for the donation of the land. If you actually look at the attachment, there's the real estate property assembly cost of $7.3 million and then the financing cost of $6 million. So although this refers to Cabela's, this was actually the TIF that was actually initiated by the city of Rapid City to recapture the value of the property that was part of the package. So Joel, are there any changes? I was going to say there haven't been any amendments or proposed amendments to this, is there?
That is correct. This is just the developer's agreement. The improvements and the amount of money and what it's going to be spent on is set out in the project plan, and that was approved in the, I believe, spring of 2007. And all the developer's agreement allows the payments to actually be made. And as you've indicated, that would allow the city to be reimbursed out of that for the money that was expended.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that Alderman Quaker had asked a few times on a few different meetings on if there was plans on Cabela's taking this piece of property and paying the taxes on it when the city voted to give them the property. And I don't think that question's been answered. I'm not sure who can answer that question, but I mean, it's been asked several times and we seem to keep dancing around the question. So I guess I'm going to ask for a decision on that. Are they going to pay the taxes on the date that the city had deeded them the property, or are we going to continue this thing into infamy?
Let's go to Joel and Dean. My understanding is there has been no deed transfer to date. I think Alderman Quaker phrased the question a little bit differently, but let's get just clarification from Joel and Dean.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I haven't looked at it, but if there hasn't been a transfer of the property, legally my guess is that they don't owe the taxes on it until the actual deed transferring the title to the property, which these documents will facilitate so we can get the property transferred. If the concern is that the property hasn't been transferred, not approving them at these time will only delay transfer of the property and it's transferred to Cabela's.
Thank you. I would be willing to continue it if my colleagues are not quite understanding this. So if there's a continuation motion, I would support it.
Would you like to make that as a motion, or? Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, let me ask a procedural question. Does anyone wish to speak before Alderwoman Hadcock speaks for a second time? Please turn on your light. If not, we will go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question. The reimbursement wouldn't be from, it would be the city to the economic development. Because if I'm right, economic development is the one that borrowed or put up money they put up some money and then did something with the city in order to do Cabela's. What was that agreement? Do you remember, Mayor?
I'll try. This actually occurred before I came back. I was in the legislature, but Joe will help me, check me on this. The recapture of the $7,372,000 for the assembly of the land was to allow the city to reimburse itself through the proceeds of the TIF for the donation of the land. Is that correct? So in other words, what we're doing here is we are recapturing the value of that land by creating a TIF and allowing the proceeds of that TIF to pay that money to the city in exchange for the land. So in other words, we're paying ourselves for the land.
So what the next one, number 57, is economic development, and what part did they have in play? I remember doing this, but I just need to be refreshed, Mayor, if I could.
There again, and I'm going to look to Joel to make sure I state this correctly, because there again, I wasn't here when this was all crafted, but my understanding was the fact that in order to, under state statute, to allow this to happen, the city of Rapid City had to donate the land to economic development, a nonprofit entity, and then economic development had the ability to use that donated land as an incentive to bring in Cabela's. Joel, did I get that correct? I guess I'll look to Alderman Chapman. Okay.
There was some money.
Yes.
So one more question. Did economic development make any money off this in interest or anything else?
My understanding, there again, my understanding is looking at what is attached on item number 57. I'll try and answer that even though we're not quite there. So my understanding is a couple of the payments would go to, I believe it was $500,000, would be sent to economic development for economic development purposes. So yes, economic development will see a additional revenue that they can utilize to go out and use for economic development purposes to the tune of about $500,000.
And I appreciate that, except that on our budget this year, we also give them an extra $25,000. And then I think, not that I'm offended by helping out economic development, but we're also, with this and budget's tight, what was the purpose of adding more money to their budget with this coming through?
I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to let Malcolm Chapman, I believe, or Marcia. I'm diving into a discussion that I wasn't here for. So, Marcia, do you want to?
Yes, those payments, that $500,000 will occur over the life of the TIF, which may be as long as 20 years. So it's not like they're going to gain that $500,000 next year. And again, it is to be used for economic development purposes. It's not a windfall. It's just another way to provide an alternative funding source for economic development projects.
So, Marcia, can I ask her a question?
Yes, please go ahead.
How much would you basically say they're going to get a year off this agreement?
I'd be guessing.
That'd be
Again, it
okay.
depends on how quickly the revenues come in.
On a guess, what would it be? Guesstimate of, a low guesstimate then? Would it be 25,000?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
I guess my point is, when I was looking at it when we were talking about economic development and why we could use the extra money, is because we do have some of these agreements out there and that this is helping them out. And on our budget, we were tight and we could have used it towards other things. Again, I'm not against economic development. They do very positive for Rapid City. They did us a favor on this as well, and they were happy that we worked an agreement. But I also believe that, in a sense, we need all the help we can get as well this year for other things. And I think with utilities and things going up, we could use that extra money as well. So, long story short on this Cabela's project, we do have some other TIFs coming forward that are asking for special exceptions on their TIFs. I just want to make sure Cabela's, we're not doing anything for Cabela's we wouldn't do for any other TIF. And making sure that the people that have these TIFs understand that we were working with them as a partner in order to bring forth economic development. And now some people are having problems with their coming forth on their projects and their development. So I guess where I'm going with this is there's a lot of things we need to take a look at, Council, and you need to look at these TIFs a little bit closer in these reorganization of TIFs of what's happening and where that money's going. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this was a little problematic when we first approved the TIF, just in the name of the TIF, because this TIF is not a Cabela's TIF. The city of Rapid City asked for this TIF to be put in place, and who will be reimbursed from this TIF are the citizens of Rapid City. The mayor was right and Marcia's right in that about $500,000 will go to economic development as a result of them putting forth $1.5 million from the Opportunity Capture Fund, which was provided by 2012 dollars. So in the round of 2012, before there was money that went to economic development, we then asked for them to use that money to help out in that whole Cabela's transaction. And as a result, they will get paid back the $1.5 million that they put in. That will go back to the Opportunity Capture Fund, in addition to $500,000 over the lifetime of the TIF. But I think it's a little problematic when we say Cabela's TIF, because this is not a Cabela's TIF. Again, this is a TIF that the city of Rapid City asked that be put in place so that we could be reimbursed through the TIF. So I think our city attorney's office is absolutely right. We can continue this item if we want, and if there are concerns about this property being put on the tax rolls, what we're doing in that process of continuation is delaying that to put the property on the tax roll. So I would hope that we would approve the item that's before us tonight.
Thank you. Further discussion, let's see, let me ask the procedural questions. Anyone wish to speak before Alderman Weifenbach speaks for a second time? If so, please turn on your light. If not, we will go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question on just on some of the, is there developer costs in this TIF too? Okay, so it's basically that goes to the economic development and then to back to the city for the land. Okay, there was no other development costs. Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 57, please.
Authorize mayor and finance officer to sign an agreement between the city and Rapid City Economic Development Foundation Incorporated. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval to authorize the mayor and the finance officer to sign an agreement between the city of Rapid City and Rapid City Economic Development Foundation, Inc. In discussion on that motion, let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. My only comment on this is that this item and the previous item were, in a sense, blessed and approved by the voters 2 years ago. For that reason, I will be supporting this item, although I do think it is important to note that $2 million of the TIF, $500,000 would go to economic development, and $1.5 million would go back to the Opportunity Capture Fund. So I think that is important to note. And I also think, once again, it's important to underscore the irony in a possible scenario where a tax increment financing district would have property in it that wouldn't be paying taxes. And I think, on principle, when the voters voted to transfer or voted on that item that was on the ballot, it was understood that that involved a property transfer. That transfer should have taken place when the county auditor certified the vote. And this council unanimously a few weeks ago authorized the letter to be sent. And I'm hoping that that letter has been sent and that Cabela's will do the right thing and pay the property taxes in arrears back to September of '07. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. The motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 58, please.
Walpole Heights Subdivision and Arches Addition, a request by Forefront Design Incorporated to consider an application for a second revised project plan for tax increment District 47 Tower Road. This is property generally described as located at Tower Road and west of US Highway 16. My motion would be for approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I made the motion to move this to legal and finance without recommendation, and I'm still having a hard time getting my arms around this particular TIF. I haven't had the opportunity to spend time on trying to understand it, but we've exhausted the original TIF, plus we've exhausted the contingency on this TIF. Now we're looking at going into interest that was set aside at 9%, which is never going to be, wasn't realized in the beginning, and 9% was an arbitrary number that was put on this TIF. And so we're going to try to take the money from the interest that was saved from a 6.5% note to a 9% note to do some more grading on this. I'm not exactly sure if I can get a clear understanding on this. I'm not sure whether I can support this or not support it, but I think there needs to be some scrutiny here in looking at this thing and having a good explanation of it. Unfortunately, I haven't had that time from Wednesday's meeting to today to spend the time to understand it. So I'm hoping that we get a clear explanation tonight, or we can continue it for some other time. So, and if someone on the council here wants to ready to vote and they understand it, if they could explain it to me, I would appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would suggest that Marcia probably can bring some insight to this, but I would also comment either before or after Marcia makes her remarks, that the developer understands clearly that they are assuming the financial risk in this particular transaction. And with that, I'd ask Marcia to comment.
Yep, we'll go to Marcia, and then Karen, you'll have the floor after her presentation. Let's go to Marcia Elkins, Growth Management Director.
Also was attached online for your review, kind of summarizes what's occurring. On the left-hand are each of the project costs that were identified in the original plan. The approved costs as they are after the revision that was approved previously. The changes that are now being proposed, plus or minus, and then what will be in each of these line items at the time should you approve it tonight. So as you can see, they're increasing the costs associated with the reconstruction and improvements to Tower Road, including sidewalks and approach improvements, by $137,806. They're reducing the amount that's identified for financing interest, and as the owner who is here tonight spoke to the committee, he indicated he understood that should there be a shortfall, that would be his responsibility. Again, that's a reduction of $255,000. The other changes are there are drainage improvements, erosion controls, electrical trenching, and additional imputed administrative fee that's paid to the city that also come out of this. And so those are the changes that have been identified. The Tax Increment Financing Committee met and reviewed this. They did recommend approval. It was forwarded to the Planning Commission. They also have recommended approval and forwarded it to you.
Yep. Let's go back to Alderwoman Karen Olson. You still have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would point out that the total costs of this project have not changed. There's just been some adjustment to financing, and clearly the developer understands his responsibility in this case, and I feel like supporting this is good for the city and good for Rapids. And as a council member, I can totally support this this change.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Ron had brought out some good questions on the interest rate on this. Did we ever get the answers, Marcia, on the interest rate difference between the 9 and the 6.5%? And we had talked to the developers afterwards, and they said anything over that interest would go above and beyond. But just a question as well: have we ever used the interest like this before on any other TIF in order to fund the project?
I think the question is, have we ever reallocated the interest line item to construction cost?
There have been probably two. I'd have to go back and look at the plans to identify which ones they were, but I know in a couple cases staff raised the same question and said, you know, there may be a shortfall depending on the funding and the number of years the payback takes place, but that was the developer's determination to move forward with it that way, and the council did approve it.
For some reason, it doesn't, I can't, and I'm sorry, I'm not a financier person. I understand the developer will take those costs or that hit. But for some reason, when we're redoing this is what I'm talking about on TIFs, just to make it work for something that we, I think, and the citizens went above and beyond and gave a TIF for, some of this stuff just, for some reason, doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't seem like it's I don't know. I apologize, Marcia, because I did not look into this. And then on the tax increment, meeting, I didn't get to go to that because I had to work that day, so I apologize. But it seems like we're reallocating, we're redoing this, we're taking this from this, and we're making these, I understand we need to make them work in a sense, but we're also going above and beyond in order to do these TIFs. There's something positive for Rapid City, I understand, but we are saving taxpayer, or them taxpayer money on some of these projects in the end that are supposed to become worth more money in the end. But I guess I would like to listen to some of Ron Weifenbach's questions again on how that interest and what that interest means to the citizens of Rapid City and to this TIF. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and go to Alderman Sam Quaker, who has not had the opportunity to speak on this issue. So let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker, and then we'll be coming back to Alderman Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mayor. There are a lot of items on our agendas that have a lot of information attached to them. However, this one is close to a record in the sense that there are 27 links for this particular item. I guess the main question for me is who bears the additional cost? I mean, who bears the additional cost, and upon whom is the risk placed?
Okay. Marcia?
This is a completely developer-funded TIF. All of the costs are theirs. They will be reimbursed the maximum of $4,894,289.47. And so the question really is whether or not that is done as interest over the life of the TIF or the actual upfront cost. So it is the developer's risk. The only way, and I'm afraid of confusing you here, but the only way that the financing would not reach these numbers is if the rate over the life of the TIF was less or it paid off more quickly. But in essence, the maximum dollars that could be received by the developer is that 4.894.
Okay. Alderman Quaker, you still have the floor, sir.
So if it could not be, if that happened, that scenario that you just identified, what would happen then?
Marcia?
Well, in essence, they've moved those costs to the upfront or to the capital cost rather than interest. So in essence, the dollar amount would be more. I'm not concerned about that in this one because already they're behind on the schedule. So we would anticipate that there's going to be more interest than was even calculated in the original amortization schedule, even though we recognize that the current rates are less, as is included in that final paragraph on that page. They're underneath the 9% that was projected, but they're behind in terms of the development schedule. So I would anticipate there's going to be a shortfall, and the developer will be responsible for that.
You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. So my understanding is that when the reform process occurred with tax increment financing, the goal was, instead of using the 9% number, which was really a windfall for the TIF owners and developers, that instead, or the applicant, that instead we went to a more reasonable rate based on the New York Prime. And now it looks like we're going back up to 9%. So the taxpayers are being charged more, and that difference is being used to fund additional portions of the project. Did I misunderstand that?
Let's go to Marcia Elkins.
That's not correct. This TIF, as that last paragraph indicates, had 9% in the original TIF, and now the interest that has been identified is that 6.5% with a ceiling rate of 9%. And again, the actual repayment made by the finance office to the developer will be based on that New York Prime plus 1%. So we're actually tracking much more carefully that interest rate, and finance is going to be looking at those certifications to make sure that that's consistent. Again, always in our amortization chart, we have to have a maximum number because it's a floating rate, and that is identified as 9%. That has not changed. That was what was in the original. Okay. We're going to pay them less based on the actuals rather than the 9%, which has always been the case. We've always paid actual.
I think the bottom line is we only pay certified interest.
Correct.
Yes, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move to continue for 2 weeks.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue this item for 2 weeks. Discussion on the continuation motion only, please. And I promised Alderman Weifenbach, did you wish to speak to the continuation motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor,
Okay,
thank you.
let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
I appreciate the offer to continue, because I just want to make sure I thoroughly understand what we're voting on here. Like I said, there's 27 links. There's been a lot of give and take on this. I think that we're setting a precedent of bad practice. When we talk about a 9%, we're talking about the maximum rate. That doesn't mean that all the TIFs are at 9%. I think there's maybe one or two that are at 9%. Also, this is a variable rate. You can't tell me that you're going to save X amount of dollars. Maybe you could guarantee you could save that if you had, this is a 5-year variable rate, so the first 5 years, maybe you could save that $255,000.
Ron, if we could, my apologies.
Okay.
Continuation motion,
Okay,
if we
so
could, please.
I guess in continuing this, I want the opportunity to sit down and maybe meet with growth management and the people on the project to see, how this all transpired. There's been give and take on this. I know this thing's changed hands and it's been given CPR and brought back to life. I'm comfortable with that, but I just want to make sure that we, are doing what's right. And there is a cost here. You have to understand that this is taxes that's not going to be paid to the coffers of the city, but the city's still going to have to provide services for this. So when we talk about no cost, I think that we need to caveat that on the same side with the fact that there will be a cost, and the cost is that these tax dollars won't be collected for the city coffers to provide services. So we have to make mention of that. But I will promise that I will meet with somebody and try to get my arms around this, and I'm hoping that my colleagues do too before they cast a vote on it. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Motion on the floor is continuation. If we could keep the discussion to the continuation motion, please. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
I agree with Sam and Mr. Weifenbach, and I'm also reading some of the notes that this completion of all approved projects, noting that the 5-year time frame expires November 4th, 2009. So I too would like a little bit of time to look at some of this a little bit closer and then read some of these notes. And I apologize. I was also gone for a week on this project and could have read it while on vacation, but just a little bit more time on this. I think the continuing is good. I don't think it'll hold up the developers in order to make this project. I'm not against it. I just think I need to look at this a little bit closer and see the differences on this TIF. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
I will not be in support of the continuation motion. I believe that this has been very adequately discussed, and that this is a project that needs to move forward in a expedient fashion.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tend to agree with Karen, but I'm going to give some latitude to those who are asking for a continuation motion if they need more time to look at this. And I hope this isn't trying to delay something, but truly are trying to look at something and get a better understanding of it. But I'm just going to ask those that put forth the continuation motion that they make a legitimate effort to try to learn what those 27 links are and what the project is really all about. I would hate for us to come back here 2 weeks from now if we continue this and then have the same discussion that I don't understand what's going on and, this is complicated. Well, it is complicated, but I think it's been vetted. I think it's gone back through the tax increment financing district committee. So I would hope that those who are asking for continuation do something over the continuation period. I will support the continuation motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Anyone wish to speak before Alderwoman Karen Olson speaks for a second time on the continuation motion? If so, please turn on your light. If not, let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do find it troubling that the developer was described as enjoying a windfall profit. I think that seems like an unfair characterization of this discussion.
Okay. Any further discussion? If we could, I'll allow Alderman Quaker to, and then we'll go to, but if we could try and limit it to the continuation, but I'll allow Alderman Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important that clarification be made, and then I respond to that, since I'm assuming that the statement that Alderman Olson just made was in response to the statements that I made. During the tax increment financing reform process, it absolutely was an issue. It absolutely was an issue of the 9%, which was an arbitrary figure, and yes, yet for those TIFs who were receiving 9%, potentially could result in a tremendous windfall for the applicants. And it was a key part of the reform of tax increment financing not singling out this particular TIF. I'm singling out all the TIFs that involve 9%. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Marcia Elkins and then back to Ron Weifenbach. There again, I'm going to start pulling us in here. The motion on the floor is a continuation motion. Marcia.
I would suggest that you have to stop off at Legal and Finance before it comes back on November 2nd. It is complex, and I would want to make sure that you had a chance to get all your questions answered. I will not be at that meeting on November 2nd, or on next week at committee, if that was your choice. But I will be in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week, and I would be more than happy to help anyone work through this. Be glad to make that.
Okay, very good. I'm going to go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix, who has not had the opportunity to speak on the continuation motion, please.
I think Marcia just made a very good point, so I'd make a substitute motion to send it back to Legal and Finance.
Okay, we have a substitute motion and a second to take this, to send this to the next Legal and Finance Committee meeting. Any further discussion on that continuation motion only? Now, from this point forward, I'm not going to allow anybody any latitude other than the discussion of whether or not it's appropriate to send it to the Legal and Finance Committee. With that, let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sit on the Legal and Finance Committee, and I think it's an appropriate motion. It probably makes more sense. And I just want to make sure that the people in the audience understand I have been doing my homework on this TIF, and it is complex. And I appreciate Marcia. She has sent me information. I've emailed her. I'm working on it. I'm trying to get my arms around it. I'm sorry I'm not as quick as some of you people up here, but I need to understand this clearly. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be in support of this motion. I can recognize that my colleagues need additional time. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, all those in favor of the continuation motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Send it to Legal and Finance.
Yes. The motion was the substitute motion which sent this item to Legal and Finance. Very good. Item number 59, please. Karen, if you could read that in, please.
Authorize Mayor and Finance Officer to sign memorandum of understanding with Pennington County Sheriff's Office regarding IT. My motion would be for approval.
Second.
We have a motion second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we've had a lot of different conversations about this, and I just want to be clear about my position on this. I am all for efficiencies between the city and the county, and I think that that's a good thing. But what troubles me about this is that we just went through an arduous process of having budget hearings and talking about not hiring FTEs and not doing that for the city. And I just found the timing curious that right after we had that discussion, I mean, we passed a budget on September 21st, I believe, or something like that. And this shows up on our Legal and Finance agenda 9 days later, which meant that it had to be to the city attorney's office probably 4 days prior to that, looking for creative ways to add FTEs to the city. I'm not in support of doing it this way. I think another way to do it would be to have the county hire those employees so that we don't add to our table of organization of adding employees. And at the same time, we still get the same efficiencies. And I think at a later date in the future, when the city is hiring FTEs, that we think about and work with the county in terms of bringing those county FTEs under the city umbrella. I'm not in support right now of this. I know some will say it's just like receiving a grant where there's grant money and there will be grants that come down that have funding fully attached for FTEs. I look at that as being different because this is not a grant. This is the county just paying for it. I disagree with this, so much so that I will make a substitute motion that we do this, but that we change the language to say that the county will hire the FTEs and our IT staff will supervise them. That will be my motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the substitute motion? Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
I'm going to have to say I was in agreement with us taking over this, but after reading the email from the chief, actually, if I'm correct, the grant is from the county. The 79,279 is from a county worker that has retired. So both of those are county. And then we would be ending up fitting the bill later, if I'm correct. Kevin, may I ask you those questions? Mayor, is that okay?
Yes, please. The question is will the city pick up any of the responsibility for the proposed
Well, this,
go
sir,
ahead.
if I could. Sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead.
The grant is for how much and who's that coming from, sir?
Mr. Tome,
I pulled the MOU, it was $79,279. It's not a grant, it's actually county dollars.
Okay, and that.
They would reimburse the city for that cost.
Okay, so that wasn't a grant, that was the retired guy salary that it's not a grant either, they would be calling the guy that retired, Bob or whatever, that's what you're calling the grant?
this goes to Kevin Tome.
279?
I think the grant actually, language came from up here, but let's go back to Kevin Tome.
Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, it's not a grant, and we haven't used that language in the MOU. It's actually county tax dollars in their salary line item that they would use to reimburse the city for the proposed 1.5 FTE.
So the 1.5 FTE would be coming from the 79,279?
That's
Kevin?
correct.
Okay, and that money was from a guy, if I'm correct, from Chief's email, a guy that had retired with that salary from the county.
Kevin?
That's part of his salary. It's not all of it, but
Okay.
it's about $10,000 less than what he was making.
Okay.
Yep, Kevin?
I guess that is my point, is I was for this, and I think after reading the chief's bottom line, what it said in there was county and city has always worked well together. We have worked efficient in many things that we have done in the past. And to me, just listening to his email, actually, when I read the whole thing instead of a piece of it in Legal and Finance, it made more sense what Mr. Chapman was saying, that we should keep it in the county, that the city could still work efficiently and have worked efficiently with the county before. And then at this point, why would we want to pick up any more FTEs when we were doing well and it was working before? And that we had said on our budget, if I'm correct, that we would not add any more FTEs. So if this was such a thing that we had done in the past and have done in the past, why hadn't it came up till now? Is it because this man had retired and the opportunity came at this time, Kevin?
Kevin?
As far as the timing of this, the gentleman retired this summer, fall. I don't remember when his last date was. We started discussions with the sheriff's office. We started discussions with the city attorney's office, and just went through a series of steps trying to sort out whether or not it made sense to do it. Then if it did make sense to do it, could we make the dollars and cents work out? And what happened is we eventually hit a roadblock where we were going to see if it would be possible to roll them all over as city employees, because there's 2 existing county employees as well. And we couldn't figure out a way to make the county benefits roll over and match the city benefits. So we abandoned that plan and came back with this proposal where they would be 1.5 city IT folks, and then there'd be 2 county folks. And in the discussion at Legal and Finance, we talked about, can they all be county employees? Can they be city employees? And we had that discussion there. And from a staff perspective, I would advocate that they all work for one or the other. In this case, it's going to be a process and take some time to get them all converted through attrition. If you make them all 3.5 county employees, I think it sets that process back, because now a year or 2 years down the road, you try and consolidate them. We don't have just 2 county employees. Now we've got 3.5 county employees we try and convert over. And I guess I would ask you to look at the model like we have in GIS, where it's joint city-county, but they're city employees. Dispatch, where it's joint city-county, but they're all county employees. The library, where it's joint city-county, but they're city employees. And I respect the discussion on the FTEs and not adding FTEs. And if that's the council's wish not to add FTEs, I can't overcome that argument. As far as efficiencies, we're taking 1 FTE and making 1.5 and saving $10,000 in the process. So.
But could we not save the $10,000 on the sheriff's side? And my question, if I could, Mayor Haynes.
Go ahead, please.
Is what's the mayor think about adding the 1.5 on, or not mayor, sorry, the sheriff on his side instead of ours to make more efficient?
Kevin?
Well, again, Alderman Chapman asked that question at Legal and Finance, and I answered it there. He said, could it work if they were county employees? And the answer is, yeah, it could work. Is it the most efficient way to make it work? And from a staff perspective, I'm telling you it isn't. So my recommendation would be is try and convert them to city employees if that's the path we're going to go down. If we're not going to go down that path, it's probably more appropriate to table it, because I don't know that we need the MOU in place to facilitate the cooperation. Their offices sit next door to each other now. I don't know that we need a formal agreement at that point if there's no dollars involved.
It just sounds, after reading the email, that it would make more sense. I understand efficiency in the process, but just reading how we do things with the sheriff, and he's very cooperative with us, and we are with him, that why would we switch anything? I understand where you're coming from, Kevin, and it would seem a little bit easy in one sense, but I think for cost effective, leaving it as it is then would be probably where we need to go then at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I listened to this at Legal and Finance, and I'm in agreement that I think that the whole overall idea here is a good idea, and I would be more apt to support the motion that's on the floor, that to leave the funding and the personnel in the county, but our budget talks is the time to have that FTE visit, and if we need to get together with the county and have a long-term goal, so it's just not all of a sudden here one day and then there the next. And I think that with you know, the development of your position, Kevin, and bringing on Russ and developing that IT department, I think that, you know, we should have these discussions and look for long-term goals, so we have a plan, not that we all can buy into. And I think it's, you know, because we do share some of the IT stuff, and I think it's a great idea. So that's why I'd support the motion that's on the floor right now, because I think this is a good idea. But I think at the budget talks, I think we've made huge steps into looking at more long-term goals for the city, and it started at our budget talks, and I think that the council here has decided to toe the line on that, and moving forward, I think that's going to be our tool for long-term planning. So that's why I'm agreeing with what's happening now, and I do agree with the overall picture. So, thank you.
Okay, let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I respect all the comments that have been made here tonight, but I tend to agree with Mr. Tome that I believe it's more efficient to have them all underneath one umbrella instead of two separate ones. You know, just gone through the process recently of restructuring in the workplace. I understand that the county has different policies, city has different policies, and it gets confusing when we have that type of thing. And I think we've done some major work on the IT for the city, and I think this is a step forward for it. So, although I respect what I've been hearing about, we don't want to take on any more FTEs, but these are going to be paid for by the county, and I just see it as more efficient. And so I won't be supporting the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question would be, if we proceed as the motion is indicating, does that basically mean that you're just starting over in the discussion?
Mr. Tome.
Can you remind me what the motion was?
The motion on the floor is, in essence, it was to pass a resolution or a motion, because we can't pass the MOU, be a motion to pass a resolution stating that the city is interested in the partnership, but only that all the employees would remain county employees.
Again, I think that.
Let me try this. Yeah. The bottom line is the fact that they would go on, because this is literally currently what they're doing anyway. Yeah. So that's why I believe Mr. Tome said, well, if you're not comfortable with the 2 FTEs coming over, or 1.5 FTEs, just table it and they'll continue on as they are. Is that a fair analogy?
In fact, I would defer to the city attorney's office too, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that a formal agreement would be necessary if the dollars aren't involved. If we feel like a formal agreement is necessary, we'll go back and I guess retool that and bring it forward without the dollars involved. I just don't know the answer to that standing here tonight. Otherwise, we'll go back and do it like we've been doing it on an informal basis, and the sheriff would agree to, or not agree. I assume he would agree to have us to supervise his IT people, and whether that's done through a formal agreement or informally remains to be seen, I guess.
Karen?
Thank you. I tend to understand the delicacy that's involved with our relationship with the county And I will be in support. I will not be in support of the motion on the floor because I think this has been an effort to create a partnership, and I realize the complexities of two entities that have differing funding mechanisms, which obviously the county is much more dependent on property tax than the city is, and some of the other issues. So understanding that, I won't be in support of the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Let's go to Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the part of the bottom line here is to create an IT that's better able to serve the citizens from an efficiency standpoint. And what I've heard is that if those employees stay county employees or they become city employees, we will still create the same efficiencies. I understand management techniques, and if we could have every employee under one umbrella, I understand the importance of that. If we hired the 1.5 FTEs, those employees still will not be under one umbrella because there's still going to be a county employee hanging out over there. Two things that I'm going to say. One is that Kevin said if that's a path that we want to go down, and that's part of my frustration here, is that from my understanding, that has not been a question that we have answered. I have not had a discussion up here at the dais or with the council that said we are trying to create one IT department that serves both city and county. We have not had that discussion. So it seems as if the ball is moving in that direction without having the discussion from the council standpoint. I'll say that. The second one is if we approve the motion that I put forward, it doesn't take things back the way they were because there's still 1.5 FTEs that's going to be hired. There was a person who was in a supervisory management position who is retired. And from the savings of his salary, there will be 1.5 FTEs that will now be created. That will happen regardless if we pass the motion on the floor or not. It's where that 1.5 FTEs will be housed, at the county or at the city. So if we pass the motion on the floor, it's not going back to doing business as usual. It's still 1.5 FTEs that the county will then hire that will make this more efficient. And that's what I'm saying. We went through a pretty hard process of talking about not taking the CPI and not doing things. And what came forward from department heads and from the mayor was a list of FTEs and unfunded things that said if we are going to, if sales tax comes in at a greater rate this next year, these are the things that we should do. This wasn't discussed then. This wasn't discussed to create those efficiencies. And that's part of my frustration that 4 days later, all of a sudden, this creates super efficiency if we can do this now. I think the motion that I put on the floor is a valid motion and a good motion. I would ask the council members to support it. If they don't support it and we go the other route and hire the FTEs and we create the efficiencies, I'm happy with that as well. But I'm going to toe the line because that's what we said as we had budget discussions down here about FTEs. And those are my comments.
Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Alderman Chapman. I appreciate you venting some of my similar frustration. I don't think it's fair that anybody on this council or myself be characterized as a person that doesn't agree with this synergy of these employees. It's never been said. This is, when we want to talk about business as usual, this is what we've been trying to get over. This fly by this seat of your pants, make the decision with limited information and no long-term planning. When I first got on the council a little bit over 2 years ago, and spent the frustration of putting through a budget that makes no sense from that standpoint, and we've put in place the stepping stones to make this a long-term process. And to me, the frustration is that I'm being characterized because someone brings forward something that they think should be done as a person who doesn't agree. And I'm not comfortable with that characterization. I disagree with that characterization. And I think I feel the same frustration that Alderman Chapman does, and I've felt that frustration since I've been on this council. That we put in a budget together, that's an important part of our job. It's one of the biggest and most important parts of our job, and it's done yearly. And I take it very seriously. When I sat there and went through those budgets, and we decided to make some hard decisions, that I think that this council should live by some of those decisions and live by the process. It's not going to harm anything. There's no synergy loss. There's no cost savings lost if we do this the correct way and toe the line on, and so we understand that our long-term goals and process will take place over time. We got introduced to this in short order, maybe less than a month ago, and it has nothing to do with whether I agree or don't agree. And I don't want to be characterized as somebody who doesn't want to go along with something or doesn't agree with something. I just want to make sure that the council understands that I never said I disagreed with this. I just think that there's a time and a place to have these discussions. We had the budget talks, and maybe it was 4 days or a week or whatever later, all of a sudden we're talking about adding FTE. I think that there's also been councilmen on this dais today who've seen what has been called the wish list of FTEs of other department heads in this city. And I just think that over long-term planning, it makes sense to do it right. If we think that this is going to be a long-term goal, then we need to talk about it and talk about it at budget time, the same period of time that the county will be having their budgets. And I just want to make sure I vent that frustration. I don't want to be characterized as somebody who doesn't agree with this. I never said that, and it's just an unfair characterization. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Can I ask Kevin?
Okay, very good. Please ask your question.
Thank you. How many IT people have we added in the last year, and then in 2009, since we changed the department? How many people are in IT?
You have to go back and unravel it a little bit, because we went through this citywide IT consolidation. Originally was a city IT. Then you took all the city folks and wrapped them into one IT consolidation. And through that process, Russ Tinswald, our IT officer, is here. Did we add one or two above and beyond that?
I believe we added two that I can say for sure, 2 IT technicians.
Deb,
So we have a total of how many IT?
how many total?
12.
You have 12 within IT,
Okay.
citywide.
And with those 12 IT, we cannot run efficiently unless we have the 1.5 more added to our staff in order to do the county, or can we still do the county work and help the county without adding more of the FTEs? I mean, you have 12 people in IT at this point?
That's correct.
Kevin?
If I understand your question correctly, can we service the city and the county needs if we just consolidate and they hire the county IT? Is that what you're asking?
I guess if they hire the 1.5 FTE, are we still efficient with our 12 and them adding their 1.5 FTE? Can we still be as efficient as we are today?
Kevin?
Again, you're gaining some efficiencies, because if you lose one employee and add 1.5, you increase your capacity by 50% for that one FTE. So the answer is yes, you increase your capacity and efficiency. I think you lose some efficiency. This is my personal opinion, but I think you lose efficiency by not trying to get them all eventually under one umbrella.
Okay.
And I'm not offended by getting them all under one umbrella. What we're doing is trying to stick to what we had said for our budget for 2010, using the 2009 money and being efficient and still work as a partnership with the county. Nothing against the county. I don't think, as was said, we have a delicate relationship with the county. I think we have a great relationship with the county. I think we have a really good relationship with our chief and the sheriff. I think it can continue. I cannot talk tonight, I apologize. I think it can continue as it is at this time. I think this is a fight that doesn't have to be, in a sense, one or the other. I think it can be efficient the way it is. Malcolm's right. A lot of the stuff that we had talked about at budget, I know some of these things we will be changing during the year because we have to. I believe in my heart this is not a have to, Kevin. It's something that would be efficient, but we could do this with a lot of things, but it's not a have to. So I think we've just complicated it a little bit more by adding this to our department and adding this into the city, when I think the sheriff is a very efficient man, and with him and this in his department, he will run just as well as he has before.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further lights, we're going to get to a vote. I think we've beat this horse to death. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Let's take a roll call.
Waugh? Aye. Martinson? Aye. Waker? Aye. Costello,
Aye.
LaCroy,
No.
Chapman,
Aye.
Olson, Wyffenbach, Kroger, Adcock.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-2. Thank you, everyone. Go ahead, please.
Item 60, authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign agreement for professional design services with ARC International for project PR 096019 Rapid City Parks Restoration restroom renovation project at a cost not to exceed $46,000. My motion would be for approval, and I believe it would be helpful for our Parks and Rec director to point out.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Mr. Cole, could you give us just a brief, I think there were some questions at committee, if you could address those questions.
The Parks and Recreation restroom renovation project began about 4 or 5 years ago with the ADA inspection that the city did. Since that time, the board has budgeted the money. They budgeted for one restroom renovation, and they thought it pertinent to make sure that we got as many restrooms ADA compliant as possible, and so they found the money to do 6 restrooms at this time. We went out and did an assessment of the restrooms and then went through RFP process, interviewed, and negotiated to this point.
Okay, Mr. Cole, do you have a map? I asked you to bring a map that showed the locations. Can you put those up on the screen?
I'm sorry, I don't have it.
You don't have a map? Okay, very good. Let's go to any discussion. I'll tell you what, one of the questions was the locations. Do you have the locations, I believe?
Yes.
Okay.
There is 3 restrooms in Canyon Lake Park. The rock shelter restrooms on the east side of the lake, those 3 restrooms. The Old Storybook Island restroom, which is by the Parks Maintenance Shop off of Canyon Lake Road, and the 2 restrooms in Robbinsdale Park. One is on top of the hill by the playground, and one is at the bottom of the hill by the playground.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, motion on the floor is for approval. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we move forward with this, I think the most significant thing that's happening with these facilities will be they will become ADA compliant. And if any of you have visited any of these restrooms in the last year, you certainly know that if you are in a wheelchair or if you are walking with any kind of assistance, it would be it's difficult to get into these facilities. In addition, there are some modernization things that would now be available, and I'm sure will emerge as the design process moves forward. And so I would urge your support of this.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Wyffenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sat on the Legal and Finance Committee, and this item came forward, and I had several questions. And there's 6 restrooms, and do we have a total cost of the project?
Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a budgeted amount. We do not have a total cost yet. That is what this contract will do, is get the estimated cost before we go out for construction.
Right. What did we budget for?
We have $475,000.
So we got $475,000 for 6 restrooms. It seems like I'm having a hard time getting my arms around this one, and we have $475,000 for 6 restrooms and $46,000 to design how to make a restroom ADA accessible. I just got my picture taken over at Vicky Powers Park. I'm assuming that this is roughly about $80,000 to $90,000 per restroom. I don't know if we could almost build a completely new restroom for that. And my other question is don't we have someone at the Parks Department or within the city that can handle the design of updating a restroom? And I mean, do we look at all the options in this? I guess it just seems to be, I mean, they were built in the 70s. My house was built probably in the early 60s. I'm having a hard time solving this one, Jerry. You know, our parks are beautiful, and I've never had any troubles with the restroom, but I am also not handicapped or something like that. If we need to make them accessible, I understand that, but this seems excessive unless I'm missing something, which could very well be the case. So when we look at upgrading, and what are we looking at doing? I ran through the RFP. It's over my head to understand it, I guess.
Okay.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, my question would be is, number one, do we have someone new within the Parks Department? I thought we hired an architect or a landscaping engineer.
Landscape architect.
A landscape architect that in-house, and we have how many engineers that work for the city of Rapid City?
Mr. Cole, was there anybody internally that could do this?
Within Parks and Recreation, no, sir.
Okay.
Have we looked within the city, Mr. Mayor?
Let's go to, I know Robert Ellis had sent an email out. Mr. Ellis, Public Works Director.
Yeah. Yes, I do have one engineer within my office that deals almost exclusively with buildings. Most of my engineers do water system, sewer system, the streets, but Rod Johnson does have the capability to take this project on. My only problem is Rod Johnson's very busy for the next 18 months with a number of projects that he's currently working on or was getting ready to take on. So it would be a delay in the project if we were to do this in-house for about 18 months before he could get started on that.
Okay.
I understand. I appreciate that, Mr. Ellis, and I know Mr. Johnson is very qualified, and that's the concern I had. If this project's been on the books for a while, but we didn't even look, to my knowledge, within inside the city to find out if there's people that are equipped to do this. I mean, $475,000 for renovate 6 restrooms seems excessive to me, and I think that we need to take another look at this and see what we actually are trying to achieve with this. I understand it's nice to have, but I mean, the parks are nice, and I don't think I've ever heard anybody complain about the restrooms, other than the fact that maybe if there needs to be a little bit more accessibility, I understand that, but that seems to be a lot of money that could be spent in other parts of the park and or within the city. If we can handle doing this within the city and saving, you know, $50,000 right off the top of that, and maybe looking at what do we really need on the renovations of these restrooms, I'd be more comfortable with that. So, I guess my question, Mr. Cole, Mr. Mayor, would be, what are we trying to achieve with the renovations exactly? I mean,
Mr. Cole?
The renovations would be totally to gut the restrooms the way they are now and rebuild the inside so they meet the ADA standards. That means that we'll be taking out the walls, the roofing. We'll also include in that heaters, because we're spending over $12,000 a year on porta potties that we put out in the wintertime. So the restrooms will need to become winterized insulation and heating and ventilation system in order to keep them open during the wintertime.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weifenbach, you still have the floor, sir.
I still say that seems fairly straightforward to me, that I think that we could handle it in-house and probably save the taxpayers a lot of money, and looking for money to move somewhere else in the parks. I'm not sure how to handle this one, but I'm not comfortable with this at all, Mr. Mayor, and I think that it's not one of those things that needs to be done. It's not a need-be project. I think that there's an opportunity, if it takes, you know, a year to 18 months for one of our engineers in-house to look at this, or if we go out and hire a farmer outside of Rapid City that does this type of stuff all the time, or a contractor or somebody with some limited knowledge, I think can get these ADA accessible, achieve our goals, and save a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I think it's important to note that this project arose out of the desire to become compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a landmark piece of legislation federally, and it's civil rights legislation. This is in a sense a civil rights issue. These restrooms are hopelessly inaccessible from a structural standpoint. They were built wrong. They were built well before 1990. They need to be completely gutted and renovated in order to become compliant with ADA. My concern with this is not the renovations, and my concern is one, I think we I would like us to, in the spirit of the previous conversation we had regarding budgeting and costs, find ways to do more work in-house. We have a tremendous budget for consulting, and we consult so much. I'm really not sure anymore what work is actually done in-house other than managing all of the consulting contracts that we have. I want to draw your attention to page 4 of 10 of the attachment. We are going to be paying $35 an hour, not for design, but for administrative work. $35 an hour, $110 an hour for the architect. And we are going to pay dearly for this contract, and I'm not convinced that due diligence has been done. As my question would be is, which other firms did we interview other than ARC International? And what kind of negotiation did we attempt on the fee?
Okay, Mr. Cole, I guess the question is, did we not go out for an RFP on this?
We did, sir.
Okay, go ahead then.
ARC International was the only one that solicited. We had 5 firms that solicited for the previous RFP, which was the assessment project, and ARC was the only one that solicited, that turned in a proposal for this. This is the second draft of the negotiations. They came back with a price, and we sent back that said we weren't going to do that, and so we did negotiate down. I can't remember the exact price. I think it was around $60,000, somewhere in there, $58,000 their first go around. We negotiated back and said, no, we're going to take this out, we're going to take this out, and Randy is going to handle some of that stuff. A lot of that was meeting prep with the contractors, meeting with the board, and so this was a renegotiation of what they first proposed, sir.
So clarification, Mayor, if I could, it sounds to me, Jerry, then that only one firm was solicited for this particular, or only one firm was interviewed for this particular contract. Only one.
Jerry?
Correct.
Did we solicit proposals from any other firm other than that one for this particular contract?
Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did. We went out, and the RFP went out on the usual networks to all the architects in town. It went out into the newspapers and into the, I'm not exactly sure what it is, the architect newspaper somewhere that it also went out into.
So why did we only interview one?
Mr. Cole?
$50,000 project.
They're the only ones that put in?
Yes, they're the only ones that put in a proposal.
But we received 5 proposals with the previous. And sometimes a lot of this is timing. I mean, we're moving into the time now where it's slow time for a lot of firms. We might be able to get a much better deal if we go back out for RFP again. I want to draw the attention to council's attention to the costs in this contract, and I think that because of the lack of competitiveness, we have created a higher cost for the taxpayers, and we have had similar situations happen. For example, the controls over at the Civic Center, when we did a competitive process, the taxpayers were saved tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so I would really encourage us to go back out for RFP and let's try to get a better deal. I will offer a motion to go back out for RFP on this particular project.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question, Jerry, you had $430,000 in your budget for the 6 bathrooms, right?
400, it was higher than that, 475?
Oh, okay, I apologize. Well, you have to take, what, 46 out for the RFP so it's 430, so you're about 72,000 per bathroom, and that's a remodel for ADA accessibility. A new bathroom, I was just asking Karen, she was in with the parks for the tennis courts, that's about 200,000. to make them ADA accessible and make a whole new bathroom. I think $72,000 is a pretty good price per bathroom on the ADA compliancy. So I understand what some of the aldermen are saying, but again, $72,000. I think the Parks Department also has worked very hard on making this possible. The Mayor's People with Disabilities Committee, this was one of their positives besides the theater that is moving forward. We thank you, Jerry, and I think this should be move forward, and it's a good project. And I do appreciate the concerns of the aldermen, but I don't think in-house in this case is going to be a positive, and we should move forward.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in support of moving this forward, and I guess we, as Mr. Quaker said just previously, is that, you know, this is great legislation, and we're trying to do curb cuts and everything else so far as we can as we go. And we've got a prime example out in front of City Hall of something that was supposed to be ADA accessible and wasn't. Now we're rebuilding it. And in light of what you said, you know, making it more winterized, insulation, it's a totally redo. It's not as simple as just moving the doors and putting on handles. I mean, it's not that simple as it might think. So it's a major renovation, and I'm in support of the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Let's go to, let me ask a procedural question. Does anyone wish to speak before Alderman Weifenbach speaks for a second time? If so, please turn on your light. Seeing no lights, let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does Vicky Powers Park, I would ask this question for Jerry, Mr. Cole, does Vicky Powers Park have heated bathrooms? And are they ADA accessible?
Mr. Cole.
They do.
And they have this, so they have heaters?
They do.
They have heaters in them and they're ADA accessible. I went by and looked at them today. What did it cost to build those entirely?
Mr. Cole, do you have an idea?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a modular restroom system, and it was about $137,000.
Okay, for the entire building and everything inside. Okay. How long has this project been on the radar screen in the planning process?
Mr. Cole?
Since 2004.
Okay, since 2004, I mean, we had an opportunity. I'm not here to chastise anybody, but I'm just saying we look at the opportunity to do this in-house, and I mean, I just think that moving forward, we need to really look at what we can do in-house. I think Alderman Quaker repeated that, and I think here's an opportunity that we lost, and possibly, as it sounds up here, I'm not going to support it. I think there's better alternatives for it. I think that it can be done for less and achieve more, probably, or for the same and achieve more. But I just think that if it's been on the radar screen since 2004, and we had the expertise in-house, we have plenty of engineers here with very, very professional credentials, could have handled this project. So moving forward, I'd like to see more synergy just between our own departments. Earlier, we were talking about synergy between the county and the city. And here we have an opportunity for synergy between our own city departments that we haven't capitalized on. So I'm not going to support this. And just nothing else, principle matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is for approval. Let's go to Alderman Bill Waugh.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to direct a question to Mr. Robert Ellis. How many engineers do we have in-house that are qualified to do architectural drawings for projects of this magnitude?
Mr. Ellis.
We have one engineer. We don't have any architects on board, but I feel he works in this arena. It's a small enough project where I don't believe state or local laws require an architect be hired. If it was much bigger than this, I believe there's a square footage requirement where you actually have a licensed architect would have to do the plans. This project would be small enough we could handle it with one of our engineers.
And I think you said earlier if we were to wait until Mr. Rod Johnson was available, it would be 18 months.
That is correct.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Well, I'm just going to weigh in just very briefly here, and I appreciate everybody's comments. I guess just an observation is the fact that we have a $475,000 project. We actually have $46,000, which is both for the design and the construction administration and observation. Typically on our city projects, we're typically looking at design work of 15%. This is actually at 10%, which includes both observation and engineering. So I appreciate everyone's discussion and questions of whether or not we can do it internally. If we could, we certainly would, but I've had conversations with Mr. Ellis, and he felt that they just didn't have the time, RJ didn't have the time to take this project on, and I think we're at less than 10% for design and for construction observation, which is typically about 33% less than we typically get on any one of the rest of our projects. So I think, although we'd always love to see it cheaper, I think it's a fair price. Seeing no further lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes with 1 no from Alderman Weifenbach. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. We had nothing under Public Works Committee items. That's unusual. We are to bids. Mr. Preston. Aaron, you got off easy tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jet lag's whipping me, so I'll take that.
And Mr. Preston, before you start, if you would, there was some discussion, and I know we moved some of this around. If you look in your packets, there is a complete bundle of all the background information on all the bids, just to make sure everyone has access to that. Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have 3 bid items on the agenda this evening. The first one is the PCC Payment Repair Tamarack Drive, Minnesota Street, 7th Street project. We received 7 bids as listed. Staff is recommending accepting a bid from Trueform Construction Incorporated in the amount of $166,725.
Move approval.
We have a motion second to award the bid to Trueform Construction, Inc. for a grand total of $166,725. Any discussion on that motion? It's a heck of a good bid. I see the advertising authority was $275. Seeing no further lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Next item is from the Rapid City Fire Department's Fire Stations 4 and 5. This is for siding. We received 7 bids. It was for 2 stations, stations 4 and 5, and the alternates 1 and 2 had to do with the doors. And staff is recommending accepting the bid from ML Exteriors Incorporated for station 4, 5, and alternate 1 and 2 for a total of $26,071.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval to award the bid to ML Exteriors, Inc. for a grand total of $26,071, which is Station 4 and 5 and alternates 1 and 2.
Correct.
Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Now, just for a point of clarification, we are back to item number 4. Item number 4, which we move to follow item number 62.
And the last item is the Rapid River Subdivision Sanitary Sewer Extension Project. We received the 7 bids as listed. Staff is recommending accepting the bid from Rapid Construction Company in amount of $36,126.74.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? This is to award the bid to Rapid Construction Company, LLC for a grand total of $36,126.74. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. We have nothing under items from the mayor. We have 1 item under council items and liaison reports. Item number 63, Alderman Malcolm Chapman on Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I just appreciate the council and staff and those that came early that received stickers or something pink to wear. So just a way to create awareness and turn the council chambers pink for a night in celebration of the National Breast Cancer Awareness Month 25th anniversary. And I'm going to read just a couple of things here. This is celebrating 25 years. Thank you, Karen. This is celebrating 25 years of awareness, education, and empowerment. And what the National Breast Cancer Awareness Month is all about is an organization and partnership of national public service organizations, professional medical associations, and government agencies working together to promote breast cancer awareness, share information on the disease, and provide greater access to screening services. Since its inception 25 years ago, the NBCAM has been at the forefront of promoting awareness of breast cancer issues and has evolved along with the National Dialogue on Breast Cancer. I met with Patty Koosman over at the Vukovic Cancer Center here just the other day, and she just gave me some stats that I just would like to share. That every 3 minutes, a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer. Breast cancer incidence in women in the United States is about 1 in 8, or about 13%. There are more than 2.5 million women in the U.S. who have survived breast cancer, and several of them we all know as celebrities or other, and then there are millions and millions of just everyday women that have been afflicted by this disease. The point of awareness is to bring light and attention to this so that we think openly about it, and women are educated to a point where that they get early detection, and hopefully we can do what we can to continue to reduce the cases that we see. I will note, though, that about 1,900 new cases will be breast cancer cases that involve men. So breast cancer is not just about women, it's about men as well. And the entire point is to shine the light, create the awareness, create early detection and screening so that we can combat this. What started me to thinking about asking the mayor, could we put this item on the agenda and doing this, and asking the council that, was the other night when I was watching Monday Night Football, and I noticed that the National Football League had turned pink. So if some of the toughest guys that we think about in the professional sporting world can turn pink for a day, then surely we can turn the council chambers and staff pink for a few hours. I would ask the mayor to think about, and maybe it's too late for this year, but to give some consideration to next year to having a Turn the City Pink Day during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, where every city employee, and we're talking about over 700 city employees, would just show their support, show that we are thinking about these sorts of issues, and ask the city to turn pink for a day. If you had 700 people running around here one day, in addition to those that are already engaged in this discussion, I think it would be just beneficial to continue to shine light on it. So I thank the council for wearing pink and wearing pins and lapel pins and all of that. I just appreciate it. Again, shining light. There are brochures over there on the table if someone would like one, just on breast cancer awareness and what this month is all about. So thank you to the mayor and to the council for allowing me this latitude.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock, item number 63.
Thanks, Malcolm. I appreciate you bringing the awareness forward on the Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'd just like to thank Mr. Roffling and the firefighters. I don't know if anybody's been at the fire stations, but pink, salmon, whatever they want to call it over there in their beds. The bedspreads at the fire stations are pink. So there was one red one, and I think that was Mr. Roffling. Just kidding. But I thought that was pretty awesome when I was visiting the fighters stations. Pretty cool. Another thing is my mother had died 5 years ago from breast cancer, so I cannot believe how many things in Rapid City and around the country that bring the education forward on breast cancer. It's amazing, and I don't think you really get affected as much. I mean, everybody gets affected, but when it really happens in the family or to people you know, you really get that awareness of how much is out there to help people. So it's pretty amazing, and if you look around or you just look it up, you'd be amazed how much people really care in this city, in this country. So I just thank everyone that does make that difference, and it's pretty awesome. And I'd like to thank the doctors and things that take care of the people with breast cancer, because I can tell you they do, and the nurses put out a lot of work. I know just from my mother, a lot of work. And one more other thing is the hospice house. It's the most amazing company I've ever seen that takes care of people that are in need. So thank you also to the hospice house.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Alderman Chapman bringing this to the dais tonight. I have a special place in my heart for breast cancer awareness. 2 minutes before we started the meeting tonight, my nephew called me, who lost his mom when he was 2 years old, and just most recently, he'd lost his mom to breast cancer in 1993, and most recently lost his father to lung cancer, which was my sister, and she died in 1993. And I recall at the time, we spent some time talking earlier tonight about breast cancer awareness and understanding that more people are affected by it. And I think part of it is just the fact that people are bringing it to light and talking about it, and there's awareness now that wasn't then. In 1993, my sister was one of like 120 who underwent a bone marrow transplant for breast cancer, and at that time was considered experimental. Obviously, she didn't live through it, but I appreciate everybody who has something to do with breast cancer awareness. It's an important factor for obviously women's health care. Back then was way behind the times and still continues to lag behind. So anything we can do to bring awareness to light is most appreciated, I'm sure, by every person who has been touched by this illness. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you. I'm glad to participate in support of women's health. And as Malcolm pointed out, this is a men's health issue as well. Please forgive me, this is a New York Yankees cap, but I did hear one day Derek Jeter talking about his concern about breast cancer too. So obviously the New York Yankees have some interest there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Not, I'll just also lend my voice and thank Alderman Chapman for bringing this forward. All too often we don't realize that breast cancer affects just about every family it's imaginable. As someone who had a mother who was a breast cancer survivor, you don't realize the impact that it has on the people it touches until it reaches in and affects your family. Thank you. If not, let's move on. We are on to the public hearing items 64 through 88. Chair will look for a motion to open the public hearing items 64 through 88 inclusive, please.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. That does take us to, let's go ahead and take public comment. Jackie, you had actually written down item 63, but I was assuming it was actually item 66. Is that correct? Okay, very good. We do have a speaker request form from Jackie Swanson. Item number 66. And as always, we do time this, so Jackie, if you could just watch the lights, and as we approach 3 minutes, it'll turn red, and if it does turn red on, I'll just ask you to basically summarize your thoughts.
Okay.
The floor is yours, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. This is really past my bedtime, but it's very important for me, and I am here to admit that my husband and I were both remiss in putting up a fence. And I want you to know that it was not intentional, that we are not that way to build something and ask for forgiveness later. We are both teachers, and we did not follow directions. And I'm here to ask for forgiveness and to offer a compromise. One of the things that we would like to do is take the one side, which would be the north area, and remove that from the site triangle so that it meets your approval. And leave the other one up that is on the side of the rental. And I have planted woodbine there to make it look presentable, or more presentable. I happen to like it. However, we would fix the other side if that was something that you requested.
Okay. Typically, we don't interact at this point, Jackie, so forgive us. This is time for you to actually talk to the council, so if you could please continue on.
Okay. I'm not here to say, well, all the rest of the people do this. I don't mean to do that. However, I did go and do some homework, and I found I know that when my husband was in here before, you talked about safety and aesthetics, and I did go around just a block and a half outside our home, and I have examples of aesthetics that would not meet the aesthetics I would think that you would agree with, and then also safety. Again, we did not put our fence up because everybody else did it. We don't operate that way. We like to follow the rules. So if you like to see these, I do have them. But at this point, I'm just asking you to reconsider your vote and to think of our compromise.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, if you want to pass it around,
Okay.
That way the council can take a look at your information. Okay, seeing no further speaker request forms, does anyone else wish to speak to any items on the public hearing items? This is items 64 through 88 inclusive. Anyone else wish to speak? If not, we will move on. Just for there again, during this part of the meeting, we do leave the open public hearing open until we get through these items. We are on to the public hearing consent items. This is items 64 and 65. Marcia, do either one of these need to be pulled? Okay. Chair would look for a motion on item 64 and item 65, and that motion is to continue both these items to the November 2nd City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to continue item 64 and 65 to the November 2nd City Council meeting. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. That does take us to the end of the continued public hearing consent items. Chair would look for a motion to close the public hearing on items 64 through 88 inclusive, please. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. We are on to the consent public hearing items. This is items 66 through 83. And the chair would ask if any items 66 through 83 need to be pulled from the consent hearing items. Anyone wish to pull any of the items 66 through 83 inclusive? Please turn on your light. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker. Okay, item 66. Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Mr. Mayor, he covered it. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure we got an opportunity to talk about that one.
Thank you. Very good. Any additional items to be pulled from the consent public hearing items? This is items 66 through 83. If so, please turn on your light. Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Items 76 through 83.
Okay, very good. 76 through 83. I believe Mr. LaCroix will need to abstain, so we'll just pull those off the consent. Any others? Not, the chair would look for a motion to approve the consent public hearing items, items 66 through 83 inclusive, with the exception of 66 and 76 through 83. Any discussion on that motion? Motion is for approval. Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are on to item number 66. And let's see, who usually reads that in? Is that?
I do.
Okay. Alderwoman Karen Olson, if you could please read in item number
That's a
66.
Public Works. This
Oh.
was discussed.
Okay,
at
let's
Public Works.
do Mr. Costello. He hasn't had much work tonight. Nice pink tie.
On the front, thank you.
It's mine.
Item number 66, the Boulevard Edition, deny a request by Brett Swanson to consider an application for a fence height exception to allow a 6-foot high fence and the 20-foot front yard setback in an area generally described as being located at 1116 11th Street. And I will offer a motion that the fence be allowed to stay with the stipulation that the site triangles be cleared.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And let's just clarify the motion. The motion would be to approve the request to consider a fence height exception to allow a 6-foot fence in a 25-yard foot setback as long as they meet all the site triangles. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Everyone clear on that motion? And Marcia, you have that up so we know what we're talking about? Okay, discussion on that motion. Okay, let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question, if I could, for Marcia. Can you show us kind of where the site triangles are? And I know there's a tree somewhere, a huge tree, that actually adds to one of the site triangles. If that's the addition to, I mean, what I'm asking is the tree is already in the way of one of the site triangles, if I'm correct, the huge tree. So would it be necessary to take that site triangle out of this to make this workable? If you look under proposed material, it kind of shows that picture, Council.
Okay? Did you?
Yep.
It doesn't appear to be in the site triangle. Barsha, can you tell what's in the site triangle?
Better draw on this one over here. Generally in this locale, some area there. A portion of it may intrude into that.
So, Ms. Marcia, that would be, the 3 red areas are the site triangles we are talking about for them removing in order to make this in compliance.
Correct. In other words, they'd be allowed to have a fence. This is counterintuitive. I'm drawing on my computer screen. They'd be allowed to have a fence for this portion, and they'd be allowed to have a portion for this 14-foot stretch here.
Does that make a weird fence? The one side would be fine, but that other side, guys, that's not even making sense. You'd only have a piece of a fence, if that's what you're thinking on this motion. And there isn't any way that we can keep that, do we have to lower the fence in order to make it compliant, or what are they needing to do to make this compliant, Marcia, if those?
The fence cannot be between a height of 2 and 10 feet, I believe. I'm going to have Robert over there checking that, 2 and 10 feet. So you'd have to have a fence less than 2 foot in the site triangle, or move it back out of it, so you could, suppose you could fence it along this line, if that was your desire, to keep it out of the site triangle.
How about the other side, same thing? They'd have to do angles on those site triangles in order to make this work?
Yeah, any fence here. Again, there's a driveway along this side, and then this is the alley itself, and in addition, there's a driveway this location.
Well, just from a couple alleys that I've seen, I can tell you there's some bushes in many of the alleys that are just like this fence, so have we not in the past done exceptions in order to help people with their fences, Marcia, and what have those exceptions been? Have they been to angle those fences, or does this council, or can this council make those exceptions to make that fence stay like it is?
Marcia?
The exception would have to be submitted through a separate process, so really it's not right for your decision at this point in time. But again, I can tell you that you've routinely required they observe the site triangle, and I would caution you not to authorize a fence in a site triangle because of the liability issues. If somebody were to get hit and the city council's authorized that incursion into that, it really does create some significant liability concerns.
Well, I know in the past we have done some things in the site triangle that have made solutions for the citizens that have made fences. I just cannot remember those, and I apologize in order to make this work, but if this council has any suggestions, I know in some of the areas, and if you look at a lot of these pictures, we have many fences that are built this way, and people have to back in or go around. But I need a little help here, because I wouldn't build the fence like that. I wouldn't ask for this exception because it wouldn't make sense. If it made sense and we could actually help these people with the site triangle issue, I would be in favor of this, but this is not helping them. It's making the fence look worse and something that they wouldn't want to build or keep there anyway. So that's my suggestion, and anybody on the council, if you have something that will make this work, we could use it right now.
Okay. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did go look at this house, and I thought it was a real problem having the 6-foot fence in the front yard. And I didn't think that it contributed. And I'm sorry, I'm not sympathetic to people who walk around and look at everybody else's house and say they didn't follow the rules, so I don't need to follow the rules. I don't think that's an excuse for anything. I don't think that makes, two wrongs don't make a right. But my question for Marcia would be, it would be possible, in other words, if this fence in front of the house were lowered to 4 foot, then that would be legal, would it not?
Marcia?
It would be legal in terms of the height of the fence, but it also is still not allowed in the site triangle.
So the site triangle remains a problem even if the fence is only 4 feet tall.
Correct.
Because I do understand that as you're a pedestrian or a child on a bicycle or a roller skater or even person who's backing out of this driveway, it's going to be difficult until they get across the sidewalk they enter the sidewalk, you can't see. And I do think that is a problem, and so I continue to be in opposition to this. And I don't know if you've got a possible compromise, please offer it.
Marcia?
Unfortunately, I think the compromise doesn't do what the applicant's wanting to accomplish, and that is typically you've allowed a wire fence, a chain link fence, because it has the opacity and you can see through it. In this case, I believe the applicants installed this because they were concerned about screening and not having any visibility. So that's where we see typically a 4-foot fence that's a chain link in a front yard along these site triangle issues.
So you're telling me that if, because of the site triangle issues, the solid 4-foot fence wouldn't be considered appropriate, or wouldn't be considered legal either?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I won't be in support of the motion on the floor. I think it's a problem.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I tend to agree with Karen. You know, I've actually helped a lot of people out with the fences, and I think what Ms. Hadcock is talking about is maybe we have put chain link fences, you know, made some of those along this way. But the only thing I have on my computer is one picture of one fence, so thanks for at least showing me some more of what's going on. But Marcia, right now, is this 6-foot fence all the way around the front?
Marcia?
No, it's just been installed along the side property lines.
Okay, so just along the sides.
There's the second one. And again, there's a driveway at this location here. And I would draw your attention, there was a letter submitted, I believe it is from the owner of that blue house, that was concerned about it not being in the site triangle there. He didn't object to the 6-foot fence as long as it was pulled out of the site triangle.
I tend to agree that there was an objection when the letter was sent out, that we do have one with the neighbor, adjoining neighbor having a concern with his own site triangle, so won't be support the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know I appreciate Alderperson Hadcock trying to find some solution, and I think in the past that solution has been around somehow having the applicant create the site triangle either by taking the fence down or putting some other material in place. I'm always troubled by these because I tend to believe applicants when they come in and they say, we didn't know, and I understand that's not an excuse, but I tend to believe them when they say they didn't know. And I think that's a bigger problem for the city, that somehow, and I know we've tried, but I would ask again that people are going to buy their materials from someplace. Is there some way that we could post the fence requirements at those places so that, you know, I mean, people have just another check to know. I guess they're, and this would probably come at great expense to the applicants, but I think there could be other solutions than a chain link fence. Could we put wrought iron? I mean, I think at the corner of Mount Rushmore Road where Walgreens is, if you're parked going a certain direction there, they've got wrought iron there. You can still see through it. It's better looking than chain link, I think, but it probably comes at a great expense. So I think there's some other things that you could do, some other materials that you could do that you could still create the site triangle and not have necessarily wood and a 6-foot fence.
Thank you. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is to grant the request to allow the fence height exception to allow a 6-foot fence in the 25-foot front yard setback with exception of any in the site triangles. Is that correct? Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I just caution you on the wrought iron. I was going to suggest that, but if you recall, we had a number of problems because of the way it technically meets our ordinance, but it causes a problem. You can't see through it if you're at the wrong angle there. So, again, that's a concern. It would be legal under our fence height requirements and the site triangle, but because of the opacity, but it has caused a problem at that locale.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is to grant the exception of the 6-foot high fence in the front yard setback with exception of the site triangles. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No.
Let's do a quick roll call, please.
Martinson? No. Quaker? Aye. Costello?
Aye.
LaCroy?
No.
Chapman?
No.
Olson?
No.
Wyffenbach? No. Broker? Adcock? Wah?
No.
That is 3-7.
Okay, motion fails on 3-7 vote. We have no motion on the floor. Chair will look for a motion.
Motion to support the denial.
Okay? Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of the denial. Is everyone clear on that? I know it's somewhat of a contradiction in term. The motion is to approve the item on the agenda, which is to deny a request by Brett Swanson to consider an application for a fence heights exception to allow a 6-foot fence in the 25-foot or 25-foot yard setback. Okay, discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question. Sometimes we put up 6-foot fences between like office commercial buildings and we call them barriers. So it gives you a difference between, so what's the difference between the barrier between an office commercial and a house with a driveway behind it and a house next door to it?
Let's go to Marcia Elkins.
So not allowed to be in the sight distance, so they have to always move those out. Often through the plan development, we'll waive the requirement for the screening fence so that they are legal with the sight triangle. From staff perspective, our most important concern is the protecting the sight triangle and the safety.
Okay, so how far, if we made them move them back, would it have to be? Can you say that again?
Those 10-foot triangles that were shown on that previous drawing.
They have to move it back 10 feet?
10 feet from this location back this way.
Oh, Marcia, you're not up on the screen there.
It just don't make sense with 10 feet. Not that that would help them any. I don't know if they'd want a halfway done fence anyway. I know.
And it's 10 feet back for this driveway and 10 feet back off of the sidewalk this direction. Similarly here, 10 feet back of the sidewalk.
Because the tree, go ahead.
This is so someone who's coming down the alley and going to enter the street can actually see a pedestrian that's walking down the sidewalk.
But there's a sidewalk and a right-of-way in front of that of how many feet?
This is the sidewalk right here.
Yep.
Right up against the fence.
Yep,
There's
there's
a
a
short-
sidewalk and then there's a
Yep.
right-of-way of how many feet before they'd even see that?
Here?
Yep. To the first sight triangle on your north
The
screen there.
sight triangle is here, and again, it's to protect the pedestrian that's in the sidewalk, not the car. That sight triangle's out here. That's not the problem. It's this one for the pedestrian, so you don't hit somebody who's a bicycle or a pedestrian walking down here, and all of a sudden, you know, somebody's coming down the alley and runs them over.
The sad part about this is, I see this all over Rapid City, and it's not supposed to be happening. That's the bad part about this. There's bushes, there's fences, there's barriers of many kinds, and they just showed us pictures of the same thing. So I wish we could help these people, but I don't see a solution, because I also need to worry about the safety of people coming around that corner. I think the guy in the house, you could work out a solution, because he sounds like he wants to, but the other side is an alley, and you got to take care of the kids and the safety of that corner right there. So, sorry we can't help you folks, but.
Okay, let's go to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the event that this request is denied, will the fence be required to be removed?
Marcia?
Yes.
Okay. I guess going back to my original motion, maybe I'm not getting it, what Alderwoman Hadcock is getting at, but it sounds like you're lobbying for, I don't see a north on here, but I believe it's actually, let's see.
Yeah,
Maybe
north is up.
North is up, okay. I believe it's the south side of the fence, you're lobbying for that to be able to stay, right? Just as long as it's clear of the sight triangle. So maybe it must be the jet lag that is causing me not to get the connection between what you're saying and my earlier motion. It makes total sense to me in this aspect to allow the 6-foot fence at least on the south side. I mean, the owner of the adjoining property says it's okay. As long as it's outside of the site triangle, we're protecting pedestrians. That's my number one concern in this whole situation. So I really can't, I don't see why we would deny this. I yield to the floor.
Okay. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor, and I guess this is procedural. Was the first motion that was to allow the 6-foot fence, but have them remove it out of the site triangle? Was that the motion?
Yes.
That was the motion?
That was the original motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask the applicants a question?
Sure. Ask your question, please.
If the council reconsidered that motion to allow the 6-foot fence, but have you remove it out of the site triangle, it would be choppy, but is that okay for you? I'm sorry, can you come up?
I think that was a yes.
It was a yes.
Okay.
I have a question for Marcia then.
Yep, go ahead.
Marcia, to have the 6-foot fence, but cut it back so it's within the guidelines of site triangle, then that would work for growth management.
That's our
Marcia?
primary concern.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to reconsider the previous vote.
Okay, I'm going to look to Joel. The problem we're going to run into here is the fact that we have a pending motion. And to go back and reconsider when we have a pending motion, I believe that we need to, go ahead, Malcolm.
I would ask whoever made the motion then to rescind the motion that's on the floor.
See, yeah, the
Mayor?
motion
Yeah, there
was
is a
made by, yes, by Karen Olson, and that was to uphold the denial. So the technical question is, Karen, do you wish to withdraw that motion?
I can withdraw the motion.
Okay, is that all right with the seconder? Is that all right with the seconder? Okay, so where were we at? The chair will rule that there is no motion on the floor. Now, Mr. Chapman, if you would like to offer a motion to reconsider, we can do that.
It is. It is. I would move to reconsider the previous item, or reconsider the vote.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Everyone clear on the motion? What the request is to reconsider the vote that failed on the 7-3 vote. No. All we're going to do, the motion is so we can reconsider the motion. Then, if that motion passes, we're back to that original motion. Okay, everyone clear on that? So, I see a number of lights. Does anybody want to actually speak on the motion to reconsider? Okay. Deb, did you want to talk? Okay, very good. The motion on the floor is to reconsider the previous question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion passes with 1 no. Now I'm going to restate the motion. The motion on the floor, which was the original, which was the original motion that was made by Alderman Costello, was to approve the request by Brett Swanson to consider an application for a fence height exception to allow a 6-foot high fence in the 25-foot front yard setback, with the exception of the placement of any fence within any site triangle. Correct? Yes. Okay, very good. Discussion on that motion. Now let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Out of deference to my colleagues who clearly wanted to talk about this further, I supported the motion to reconsider, but I still think this is problematic. Looking at the diagram, then what I understand is they'll have that little section, well, however long that is. That seems kind of not very useful or whatever it is, and certainly not very attractive. And I still won't be in support of this. I think that our policy concerning 6-foot fences in front yards is a good one, and we should follow it.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question.
Yep.
On this, are we making them do all 3 site triangles?
Yes, that is the motion on the floor.
See, I don't think that's common sense. I think the main areas are the 10 feet in front of the,
Okay.
the sidewalks.
Motion on the floor is for all 3.
Okay, I'm not in favor of that. That's gonna look that's a funny fence.
Okay. Okay.
It doesn't make sense to, Marcia's.
It's the motion.
Did you have a question for Marcia?
Yes, Marcia was gonna answer.
Okay, Marcia.
Again, certainly you could also, as part of this, and I was going to ask for clarification, is your intention to allow them to, right now the fence is angled only out here at the corner, to allow them to extend this in the 6-foot area here. As I understand the motion, that would be allowed as well.
Yep. The only restriction would be no fence in any site triangle.
I'd ask you to also not allow it along this front property line. I think that would change the nature of it as well.
Okay.
Explain, please, if you would.
Well, again, my understanding is that they're trying to do a screen to the properties to the either side. If you were to strictly take the motion as it's written right now, as I understand it, you could come in and put a fence then all the way across the front, as long as you stayed out of those site triangles. And I don't think that's the intention of the council, and I just wanted clarification.
That is the motion on the floor. Marcia is correct. Deb, you still have the floor.
Okay, so bottom line, how the fence is gonna look is, this side is with 10 feet back, and that one's like a middle fence with an angle on it of 6 feet. Am I correct, Marcia?
Again, as the motion is written, I believe they can put a fence all the way across the front, 6 foot tall, and also here, as long as they stay out of the side triangles.
Okay. Just a question, that's not my motion, but the angle is by the tree, so I'd like to know how you're gonna get that angle you're wanting there for that site triangle with that tree there.
Marcia?
Again, my suggestion to you to accomplish what I think the council's wanting to do is to approve a motion that would allow them to put it along the alley property line and then to angle back to the house outside of the site triangle, wherever it needs to be so it doesn't interfere with the tree. And similarly on the south side, that you'd allow it along the south property line. I think that's what the council's wanting to do. So it'd just be a tweaking of the motion on the floor.
Okay, I'd like to make the motion that Marcia said, that amendment or
Okay.
whatever it's called.
What we're going to do is we're going to deal this as an amendment.
Thank you.
So the amendment would, let's do it this way. The only thing we would need to amend is to also state that no fence along the front, which would be the west property line, be allowed. Is that correct, Marcia?
Yes.
Okay, so that is the amendment. So the amendment would be to not allow a fence along the west property line within the 25-foot front yard setback.
And allow them to angle that back
Well,
piece.
we're going to deal with just the amendment first, and that's strictly dealing with the frontage.
Okay.
Okay? So is everyone clear on the motion? Does anyone wish to talk to the amendment? Anyone wish to talk? I have a number. Lloyd, did you want to talk to the amendment? No. Okay. Anyone wish to talk to the amendment? I see no one wanting to talk to amendment, so we'll go ahead and vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion passes with 1 no. We are back to the original motion as amended. And let me see if I can restate this. The motion on the floor is to allow or to approve a request by Britt Swanson to consider an application for a fence height exception to allow a 6-foot high fence in the 25-foot front yard setback, with the exception of within the site triangles and along the west property line. Marcia, does that? Yep. I just want to make sure we have the right motion.
I hate to do that, but technically they could then move the fence in 2 feet here and install it.
Okay.
I think you need to specify where you'd like the fence, and a substitute motion might be a way to more clearly identify that.
Okay.
My apologies.
Okay. Alderwoman Hadcock, you still have the floor, ma'am.
Okay, Marcia, could you read the substitute in for us?
My suggestion to you would be to approve the fence height exception to allow the 6-foot fence as long as that is located outside the site triangles and along the north property line, along the south property line. Along the north property line, it could be angled back to the structure, avoiding the tree.
Thank you. That'd be my substitute motion.
Okay. Marcia, can you use a different color besides red? Can you pick a different color? Does it allow you to do that?
Or draw a squiggly line. Just squiggly.
Try blue or green or something. Okay, there's blue.
Some way around the tree.
Okay.
Tree.
Oh, that's good. Where's the squirrel?
We're getting
Okay.
there.
Now, Marcia, the way you drew that, I want to make sure everyone understands that they would not be allowed to angle it back towards the front sidewalk. Is that correct? Was that your intent, Deb?
Right.
Okay. So, everyone clear on the motion. This is a substitute motion to allow the exception of the fence to be built as demonstrated. Now, I have a number of lights. Deb, did you have anything else?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay, let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the council trying to find some solution. We talked about aesthetics earlier, or the applicant did. I'm not sure if that's the intent that they had in mind when they first started thinking about a fence. But what I think the council will do if we approve this is give them an opportunity to do something. If they choose to say this is not what we had in mind, then that's on them. To say, we're not going to build this because we don't like the way it looks. But at least the council has tried to work with something to help them create some fencing in their yard, and at the same time create public safety by not violating the side triangle. So I appreciate the efforts of the council, and it's on the Swansons to do this however they want to do it in accordance with the motion that might be passed. Marcia, I have a question though, and it probably goes back to the same question of if people truly legitimately go to build a fence and they don't know that they need to come to the city or somewhere to find out, who is going to regulate that this fence is built like this? I mean, where do they make sure, how is that done, that this fence is built along that angle only to this point, and then along this line only to, who does that?
Marcia?
Well, ultimately, this came to staff as a complaint, so I suspect that staff will be following up as part of this to make sure that it meets the direction of the council.
And maybe this is going above and beyond in terms of customer service for the city, but they've already gone through a great expense to put up something that they're going to have to take down. I would hope that we would have those conversations with them prior to them trying to do this.
My staff or I'd be glad to meet with them on the site if that would be helpful to them.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Just a word of thanks first for the comments from Alderman Chapman, and also highlighting the issues that we've run into a lot up here, and that's just education and knowing what we can do as property owners. And thanks, Marcia, for helping me shape that motion. Who would have thought it would be so difficult to offer suggestions on where to build a fence? And thanks to all the council here for this deliberation. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. Good work, council. I think, I wasn't in support of this at the beginning because I didn't have the links of the pictures. But, from looking at their yard, do beautiful landscaping. And I think with what they come up with, you can use some of the material that you have to take back and do the angle, so you're not a total loss of the material. And I think you could do some great landscaping to redo it the way you need to do it. And so I just appreciate the council working through this and getting it done. And I hope this works for you guys. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. I'm not going to repeat it. Everyone understand what it is? Okay. We're going to go to a vote. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let's take a quick roll call if we can, please. I think it was 8-2.
Quaker?
Aye.
Costello?
Aye.
LaCroix?
Aye.
Chapman?
Aye.
Olson? No. Wyffenbach?
Aye.
Kroger? Aye. Hadcock? Aye. Wah? No. Martinson? 8-2.
Motion passes 8-2. Thank you, everyone. We are on to item number 76, and Alderwoman Olson, I think we can take items 76 through 83 together.
Yes.
All of them together. Okay, that was interesting. The motion would be to approve items 76 through 83 inclusive.
That would be my motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve items 76 through 83 inclusive. Any discussion on that motion? Alderwoman Deb Hadcock, did you have any comments?
On 76 through 83, if we are in litigation, do we have to abstain from this?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Alderman LaCroy, I believe you're
Yeah.
going to be abstaining because your wife works somehow indirectly with this company?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Very good. Motion on the floor is for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are on to the non-consent calendar. This is items 84 through 88, and Alderwoman Olson, if you would, let's see, who reads that in? That's actually Mr. Costello, isn't it?
Nope.
Okay. Alderwoman Olson, would you go ahead and read in number 84, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Second reading of ordinance 5545, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Peter Newman for Mills Drug Incorporated for a rezoning from medium density residential district to general commercial district on property located at 730 St. Cloud. My motion is for approval with stipulations.
We have a motion and second for approval of stipulations, item, ordinance number 5545. Any discussion on that motion? Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Marcia, will this involve a plan development designation?
Marcia?
No, it will not.
Okay.
Is that something that staff could support?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. If you look at the zoning map, you can see that the property surrounding this on three sides is general commercial and does not have a planned development. There are areas further north where there's been encroachments that they were required. You can see those little black dotted lines. Those are planned developments. But because there is not a planned development on the surrounding property, the Future Land Use Committee and the Planning Commission did not feel a planned development was necessary in this case.
Alderman Quaker, you still have the floor, sir.
How will the city make sure that the landscaping points are met and that the proper screening is met for the adjacent neighborhood?
Marcia?
There are requirements between the commercial and the residential for screening. Because of the kind of development anticipated on the site and the site plan we've seen to date, they will likely either need variances or planned development at their request. But again, it's because they will likely be asking for revisions or modifications to certain requirements. So either through the building permit or whatever other review needs to occur as part of a planned development or a variance.
So also, if I might ask, really the issue of planned development designation would probably be better suited more comprehensively similar to the overlay district that was put on Fifth Street. What then is the status of the Mount Rushmore Road corridor study that would then ultimately allow that to happen?
Marcia?
We're anticipating that the consultant on that, KLJ, will have that to us by the end of the month. I've been promised that that will be to us, and then we will schedule another public meeting so that the public has an opportunity to comment. And at that point, then it would go through the normal process through the Planning Commission and ultimately in front of the City Council. So I expect that you will see that in the next 60 days.
One more thing is I do not remember seeing the sign. Was the sign posted on the 8th Street side, or where was the sign? Where was the sign posted?
Sorry. I'm checking to see if it might show in the photograph.
There it is. Right to the right of the tree.
Very good. And none of the neighbors at all expressed any concerns on this?
I'm not aware of any. I don't recall seeing any linked.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've spent some time looking at this particular item, and since I do have a business, I don't actually work at the business now on 8th Street, and I've seen some of the transformations that take place, and I'm hoping that in the future that some of the property owners can take heed to what's going on here, and that this property is going to be improved significantly. As you can see, there's some of the challenges that they have with that property now, and moving up and down the street as we do overlay Mount Rushmore Road. I'm hoping that some of the other property owners will look at some of the same alternatives and try to make their properties better as we go. You go down the street further and you can see what Medicine Shop's done with their property down there, and so I think this is a good thing for the city. overall on Mount Rushmore Road overall to make those businesses functional and make them, you know, there's down the street farther, there's a couple empty ones that I'm hoping that someday they'll make some changes on those properties to just to make it more aesthetic to the atmosphere that's around there. The property directly adjacent to them across the street has had several improvements done on it, which has really significantly increased the values of the neighborhood there and actually made it look better. So, but one of the questions I noticed that a lot of these have stipulation on them. I'm assuming that the applicants are aware of the stipulations,
Marcia.
Stipulation on this and the subsequent items is that they have to have the adopted comprehensive plan amendment, which was already acted on the agenda. So they're in compliance with that stipulation.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Let's go to Alderman Ron Kroger.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at that picture, is that a fence height problem there with the site triangle that we just talked about?
It's green.
Is that what we were looking at? I just noticed that.
Right by a sidewalk.
Marcia?
It's going away right now.
It would appear to be one, yes.
You what?
It would appear to be one, yes.
Yes.
It is.
Okay. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is for approval of stipulations. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 85, please.
Second reading of ordinance 5546, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Ferber Engineering Company Incorporated for South Dakota Game Fish and Parks for rezoning from general commercial district to public district on property located south and west of the intersection of Dean Lane and Sturgis Road. My motion would be for approval, and I have a comment.
With stipulations?
Yes, with stipulations.
Okay. We have a motion and a second for approval of stipulations. Any discussion on that motion? Marcia?
I just want to draw your attention, there is a letter of concern that has been put in your packet. The comment was that they would like to see a fence around the boundaries of the public property. It's not something that you can really address through the rezoning itself, but I just wanted you to be aware that we'd received that communication today.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is for approval with stipulation. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
I just wanted everyone to understand that this is the property associated with the west campus of the education program that is being put together by the Game Fish and Parks. It is, it's very reflective of a very complete plan. I see this as a wonderful opportunity to do cooperative things between the city of Rapid City, which has adjoining property, and the Game Fish and Parks. So I think this is a good improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion on the floor is approval of stipulations. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 86, please.
Second reading ordinance 5547, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Ferber Engineering Company Incorporated for South Dakota Game Fish and Parks for rezoning from low-density residential district to public district on property located at the northeastern terminus of North 40th Street. My motion is for approval with stipulations.
Second. We have a motion and second for approval of stipulations. Any discussion on the motion? We're dealing with second reading of ordinance 5547. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 87, please.
Second reading of ordinance 5548, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Ferber Engineering Company Incorporated for South Dakota Game Fish and Parks for a rezoning for mining and earth resources extraction district to public district on property located southwest of the intersection of Knutson Lane and Sturgis Road. My motion is for approval with stipulations.
We have a motion and second for approval of stipulations. We're dealing with item number 87, which is second reading of ordinance 5548, which is a rezoning from mining and earth resource extraction district to a public district. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 88, please.
Second reading of ordinance 5549, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Ferber Engineering Company Incorporated for South Dakota Game Fish and Parks for rezoning from low-density residential district to public district on property located at 603 and 620 North 44th Street. My motion is for approval with stipulations.
We have a motion and second for approval with stipulations. And this is dealing with second reading of ordinance 5549, rezoning from low-density residential district to public district located at 603 and 620 North 44th Street. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Preston, bill list.
Thank you, Mayor. The bill list totals $5,655. $5,655,834.04. I'd like to add two items to that. One is for mainline contracting. That's change order number 1 final for the South Street Sanitary Sewer Extension, $1,899.99. And the second one is also the mainline contracting, change order number 1 final for Locust Street and Fairmont Boulevard Water Main Reconstruction, $2,828.15, which would make a new total of $5,660,562.18.
Second. We have a motion and a second for approval of the bill list as amended. And double check me, Jim, I think I caught it. $5,660,562.13?
18 cents.
18 cents. Thank you. I didn't want to short somebody a nickel. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. Mr. Lundin, do we have an executive session?
Yes, Mayor. I don't expect that any formal action will be required after the meeting. Be for the purposes enumerated in subsections 1, 3, and 4 of SDCL 125-2.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go in executive session for the purpose permitted by SDCL 1-25-2, subsections 1, 3, and 4. Any discussion on that motion? Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Mr. Mayor, does that mean we're going to talk about this piece of document on the dais here? In reference to Deb?
Yes, that is correct. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We are in executive session. Thank you, everyone.
That's a good question.
Executive session. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're out of executive session. We have a motion second to adjourn. Any discussion? No discussion on adjourned motions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned.